Hey everybody, I'm Jody Vance,
And I'm George-Affleck.
and it's time for
Vancouver's parks are melting in the bureaucracy and nightmare that is Vancouver Park Board. Unspun.
I've lost the plot, George. Law of land.
Your column and all this past week, and we talked a lot about this last week about the park board in Vancouver. I mean, you really hit it on some of the points we talked about last week in your column in the Orca.ca. For those who listened last week, go back and listen. But I mean, fill us in on a little bit on your touch. Give us a taste of your column.
Well, we do really have conversations here on UnSpun podcast that unpack the uncomfortable, right? Like we talk
Mm-hmm.
about the stuff that's frustrating us as taxpayers, as citizens. We try and peel back the layers of the spin that we're given and look at the why. And last week, you started by saying, wow, your Twitter, holy crap. Because
Yeah,
I put out there,
got
like,
people going.
where's our money going? Like, where's
Yeah.
our money actually going? Where's the budget? Somebody show me. I don't know how to do this, but somebody show me. George, my phone, it wasn't just my DMs. Last week, I was like, wow, I'm getting a lot of DMs.
Mm-hmm.
I have people who shall remain nameless because I don't need to tell you. But people in politics, in neighboring municipalities, as well as the city of Vancouver,
Yes.
staffers on the park board and elsewhere, phoning me, texting or DMing me, and then saying, here's my number, call anytime. I got a story for you. And I spent hours on the phone listening and just, I want to be mad about everything. And yet I want to be mad about nothing. Because what I really want is our parks to be healthy and safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so that's where I went through all of the stages of grief, and I hovered in frustration and anger for a little extra, you know what I mean? Because when you
Yeah.
look around in the city of Vancouver, for some reason, I don't know what the reason might be. I do. Um, our parks are garbage right now. Like they're covered in garbage. They're covered in refuse. They've got like human feces to goose feces. We've got E.
Mm-hmm.
coli in the waters offshore, which no, the park board can't control, but it's part of our
You know
park
what?
situation.
And you know what the park board does not have, and I'm not sure if I talked about this, but I do know this. They don't have any data on usage. You can't tell me, they can't tell us how many people visit whatever park. And so, for example, I live in Yaletown, and we have at Emery Barnes Park, and it's quite a small park, but man, is it busy, and it gets a lot of use of my kids. Two of my kids, well, all three of my kids have kind of grown up in that park. And it's it's got a really great playground, but it that's the same playground that was built 20 years ago now, and they've redone the tiles. But the part it used to be nice potted plants, nice little trees. They've gone. They just kind of moved them and replaced them with nothing, and bricks are falling. It's just the trees are kind of straggling, and the whole thing needs to be replaced. But you know what? There's no data. We don't know how many people visit there, but I would say it's easily, thousands per day. But that's just one park that I know of. They have no
Yeah.
data on park usage. What drives me crazy, and we talked about this last week, and I talk about this in politics a lot and in governance, and we talk about strata councils and how you're required to have a plan. I don't get the sense that the park board has any master plan about things like that. Okay, if you're going to have what parks are used the most, therefore we have to make sure that we take care of those parks and spend more money on them because of course they're being used. Then we need to take care of the parks that aren't being used, and we have to figure out why, and maybe we can make them better. Or maybe we shouldn't touch them because maybe they should be, left to kind of do their own thing. Who knows? I don't know. But that's what drives me crazy about this park board. Even knowing, okay, how many people, how many dogs were fined in some parks, like knowing that, and they know that, maybe we should step up enforcement. Or what about complaints to 311? Or yada, 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 yada. All these things. And I go, we all know. And I thought it was funny because in your column, you said there are two things that people say the park board is focused on all right now. And what were those things?
This was from an insider,
Yeah.
and my head almost popped off my shoulders. Our park board
Yes.
has two priorities right now, and only two. Those two priorities are climate emergency and reconciliation.
Worthy causes,
What does the
100%. But as you say,
Totally. But what does the park board have to do with either of those things? Somebody sent us, one of our listeners copied us in on a podcast that somebody on the park board staff, I'm sorry, I can't remember
yeah,
her name. I did listen to it, but she's got a podcast that they're launching about women, gender equity and women's abuses in the workplace. Now, again, another extremely worthy cause. But you at the park board, can you make sure the park's safe before you do the pet project over here about something that has nothing to do with the park board? That's
well,
the thing for me,
safety
George, and
for
that's what I
women
get
in
into the
park.
column. I
Sa-
shouldn't have to phone somewhere to say, is the pool open? Are there lifeguards at the beach? Is the lawn mowed at the park where I'm taking my kids to play football? Is are the water features functioning on this incredibly hot day? Or I'm going to go walk around Lost Lagoon. Is it still blooming green algae? Or is it safe? Are the fish floating on top? Are they swimming underneath the water? Like this is, and then I read a
Mhm.
little deeper. It's like, well, we've allowed nature to take over. No, nature takes over
We
all
live
around us
we
here.
live in a rainforest. We live in a rainforest. It will take over everything. It'll take over our buildings if we wanted to.
It's insanity. And then I get mad at individuals, and I don't even need to name names for you to know who gets under my skin here. But the
Mhm.
people who promised to take care of our parks and then have literally waltzed in and said, I've got this on the off the record in terms of who I got it from, but basically one of the park board commissioners went into a meeting allegedly very early days of this current administration and went in to a meeting and said, I'm not here to find out what you need and take it back to the park board. I'm here to tell you what the park board's going to do here. And like that, like
The arrogance.
I'm sorry, you work for us. You work for us. We're paying you.
Yeah, you're a conduit
This is
to
ridiculous.
what we need, and we vote for you because we want you to represent us. You're representative. Literally, definition of a politician is to represent the people and the majority of people. And
Public
party politics should go
service.
set aside. Public service, proper public representation. Fight for what we want, and I would say that you'd be hard pressed to find people. And in your column, you actually do this. Find you define what is a park and what is a public, and you put a dictionary definition.
Oxford.
It's an
Nobody can
important
argue with me. It's the
it's an
Oxford Dictionary.
it's an important point to remind people, even though they should be able to look at their constitution or their bylaws that the park board has and see right there what their rules and what they're supposed to be focused on. And mostly it's the upkeep of our parks. That is clearly
And I
not the
spoke
case,
with,
as you know, because we look
no,
around,
no,
you
it's not.
go over to Burnaby and you go, all right, now this is what good looking parks are. Or you see, POCO launching new community centers and new parks and this and that. You're like,
Absolutely.
what is happening in Vancouver? And we ranted about this last week. We talked about there was no, because they are in charge of our community centers, our beaches, our seawall, which is closed down now in two chunks. Our pools closed down now. Kids pool closed. Just pools that are supposed to be built that aren't built. Another pool is supposed to be built in Marpool by now. Nothing's happened on that.
Facade falls
Um,
right off our other major downtown pool,
yeah.
which is the place. These are the playgrounds for the people who are living in the teeny tiny, expensive, multi-million dollar boxes. These
Mhm.
places and spaces are the yards of the citizens of Vancouver. And when you talk about other municipalities, neighboring municipalities, when I spoke to a couple of leaders there, people who have worked with our current park board executive director, and have looked at what is being done, and it's Vancouver's a unique environment, right? You can't transport people in from other jurisdictions around this country and apply it to Vancouver. I mean, that's been tried on
Mhm.
every level and most every. We're unique in many ways, and park board also unique, but having the mindset of protectionism, right? Like that beautiful bench down in Kits Point that this artist
Oh
in the
yes,
name of her
right.
loved one painted it. It was
How
gorgeous. Park
dare
board,
you?
take it down. Take it down. We will not have that kind of community here because people are just going to run roughshod and paint all the benches. And it's like, but the
It's
entire wall on the other side of the same beach is covered in graffiti that is
yeah.
not fit.
Focus on that. I think that this election campaign, even though a park board is not part of your city council, It's a separate entity. It's a separate elected park board. I think Ken Simmons on the right track of saying abolish the park board as part of his campaign. It'll never happen because of the complexities of that process, unless he gets a majority of people on park board who then immediately put a motion forward to abolish the park board. That's what he has to do. The likelihood of that is slim, and they'll get in there like, oh well, maybe we can fix it. So it's do you want to do the people? If he just focused on that as a campaign and just did that, he could do quite well. I think my only thing I'm going to do is abolish the park board. It's like Gregor Robertson saying he's going to solve homelessness, which he couldn't do, but he won 2 elections on that, and the third he still won, but he said he was sorry for making all that stuff. Anyways, I would say that I have never been somebody to say abolish the park board, but based on what we see happening in other communities and how good their parks are, and they don't have an elected park board, the politics is what's getting in the way here. These pet projects, these pet issues, these issues that are important on an international scale, the national scale, even a provincial scale, are not within the purview of a park board. Especially if you're neglecting the priorities. And this goes to the city of Vancouver as well. Like it's $290 million being spent on stuff that we're not supposed to spend our money on in Vancouver. These are things that I think people are sick and tired of. Yet there's a whole other side that are afraid to get rid of it. I'm in the almost finished San Francisco. I don't know if you've read it. I recommend it for anybody because there's so much. It's a book, about San Francisco and very similar situation to Vancouver. It's like this is a problem. You have this battle of the progressives and the non-progressives. What if that means? Because I don't really understand the fact that you can be a progressive and be left or right wing, but there's this movement that is making it's paralyzing decision making when it comes to so many things in city government, and because of this wokeness and this progressive you can't do that because of this and that, and they get they themselves are getting in battles about the solutions for these things, and somebody needs to stand up.
You taught me one thing really important, and I articulate it in the column because a lot of, as I said, my learning of the processes behind the scenes of these elected bodies. You told me it's next to impossible to abolish the park board. So I'm not suggesting we abolish it, but I do suggest that it be modernized. And I don't know what's involved in doing that, but there needs to be guardrails in place where the parameters are here. And before any pet project hits the table, before one big flashy pylon comes out to stop traffic in Stanley Park for a bike lane, I said it. We got to make sure that everything else is done, that all of it's done, all of it's fixed, all of it's paid for, because our tax dollars are being spent so that we can go to Queen Elizabeth Park and sit by those dancing fountains. And I mean, I lived up my grandmother because we had no money. So she's at Broadway in Collingwood. She's, taking care of my brother and I while my mom was working single parent environment. We spent a ton of time with my grandmother, with my grandparents, and we'd hop in the car with a couple of coffee crisps in the Impala, and we would drive up to Queen Elizabeth Park, and we would sit on the edge of the fountain, and we'd just look around and watch the fountains happen and run around and be kids, and they'd sit there, and it's like it's a piece of us that it's dry, it's broken, it's so sad.
My if I were mayor, my soon to be written column, maybe, who knows if I ever get to it. If I was mayor and if I was on park board, I've talked about this before, zero-based budgeting. First of all, as soon as whoever wins this next election, at park board and at council, need to go back to zero. Say, how much money do we have? We kind of know that number.
Publish that.
We know what it is. We know how much money comes in and where it comes from. Okay, we've got that much money. Now, what are our priorities? Okay, let's start with those. And, if I was in the city of Vancouver and I would say, I think, like, for example, street cleaning budget was slashed in 2008 by 30%. I think it's maybe back to the number it was in 2008, or maybe just slightly surpassed it. That's 14 years ago that the street cleaning and streets budget is just getting to the point where it was in 2008. You would immediately say,
it's 2022.
What do we need to do? Well, obviously we should increase that budget by 30%. Let's just start. Okay, we want to make street cleaning and the sidewalks. We need more money for that. That's just much money. Okay, now we want to do this. Okay, now here's the bottom line. How much money do we have left of the money we know that comes in? Oh, we got this much money left. Okay, let's sit down with the people of the city and and now you all, the council and the park board, can fight over their whatever things that they are pet projects, whether it's putting cones in Stanley Park or reconciliation, I don't know, all these different things. And then you can decide what the next 4 years should look like based on, so you've got this stuff. Okay, we're going to do all this really well. Now we've got this other bit of cash, if you have any cash left over, which, and if you want to get more cash, then you better justify it. And so whatever little ideas you have, then that comes last. And you present that to the people of Vancouver. You go through a public process. They have until March, April of 2023 to make these decisions. They go through a process. They don't have to approve the budget in December and January once they're elected. Take the time, focus on those main priorities, start from zero, build it, say, what are we missing? What needs to be improved? Now, okay, we've got some extra cash. What do you want us to do with this extra cash, everybody? Or do you want us to just lower taxes? Because that could be an option.
Yes.
Why not? Or
how about no tax
let's go for
increase.
One. Yeah. I mean, or
how
what about
just no increase?
I had this idea. Here's an idea I came up with. For example, why not? Okay, if we want immediate density, how do we do that? Well, what if we were to do a laneway house program where you actually got a tax incentive to build a laneway house, because there's still lots of room for laneway houses. And we also said, okay, there are 5 designs available that we know meet all the environmental criteria, the whatever, and they're basically plug and play. They're they're templates. You buy them off a shelf. We work with a Home Depot or whoever, and we say, here are the 5 laneway houses. And guess what? If you buy these, we'll give you a taxi, and you just have to you just buy these and you put them in your backyard, put a slab down. You don't need to go through any permitting process or anything, because we know these 5 are pre-approved. You got a laneway space. You had a garage.
Brilliant.
Tear that down, plop it down, put it in there, move in. Done. You can have that built in 3 months. I mean, this is the kinds of things that we need to do in our city.
That's your if I was mayor column. That should be your if I was mayor column, because that it makes it. But see, the problem here, George, and I know we're shifting from park board to the city on this one, but I think it comes back to common sense, and that's what's been lost. We've lost the plot. Mm-hmm. We've lost the plot on what's best for everybody, and I mean everybody. And interestingly enough, only just a handful of those crazy people those hub people on Twitter who come at you and turn everything. I know you hate bike lanes. I'm like, oh God, can somebody cancel the paycheck that this individual gets 100%. To come after me on Twitter? Like, it's just such garbage. It's such
Why
garbage.
Does the city fund lobbyists? I don't understand it. I
would erase
Here's
that.
Another idea
I would like a mayor who says they will erase that.
Here's another idea I came up with, by the way. Okay, so you know how we always mock the 43 communications people? By the way, 43.
Cheers. Yeah. Cheers. 43 communications.
Okay, imagine if you were to get rid of 2 of those positions and then say, the City of Vancouver now has a operating grant of $200,000 available to media outlets in the city to pay for a City Hall reporter to cover City Hall full-time, arm's length. We don't want you. We're not going to tell you what to do, what to cover. You have complete whether it's the Tyee or Vancouver's Awesome or whatever, I don't care. Whoever applies for it, maybe they get $10,000, maybe they get $20,000, whatever, and they get that money. I know taxpayers might go, well, "How dare you give that money?" But guess what? It's really hard to cover City Hall. We're relying on these 43 communications staff to push a message out to us. Reporters don't have the time to cover City Hall because these media outlets are losing staff. They can't afford it. If you were to say, "Here's some money, cover City Hall," hold us to account. We'll give you the money. We want you to keep us honest. We're going to pay.
They don't want to be kept. They don't want to be kept
Well,
honest.
I'd say that's I think that would go hugely.
It would be better. No doubt. Yeah. I agree with you.
Just ideas I had on the treadmill this morning. I got another idea in my head.
Another one. What about when you're talking about the election coming up? Yes. Can we talk a little bit about the funding and the money that the candidates who are running for mayor, like where are we at with that? You said you were getting some intel, because last week we were talking, right?
Yeah, Frances Buehler wrote a column for Globe and Mail, and then she was on the Canby Report talking about this as well. Shout out to those guys who do a good podcast. They do similar to us, except they do interviews, whereas we just talk. So we just talk this. But they talked about Ken Sim had raised quite a lot, over 179,000. There's a few parties. NPA hadn't submitted their financials to the province. This is money that's been submitted to Elections BC that you're required.
Right.
to submit within the Societies Act and all that stuff. Anyways, there were several parties who had not submitted their financials for whatever reason. I mean, it's April. What's going on? But I was
Yeah.
surprised at how little
What are you hiding?
people. Well, I was a little surprised that I thought Ken Sim had raised a lot more. If I remember the emails that we all got, I thought he said 400,000 or something at the end of December in his email. But I'll check that. I think that I was just surprised at how little the mayor had raised and how little Ken Sim had raised. They'd raised more than anybody else that was on record.
Yeah.
But I think it's, and that was for 2021. Obviously now it's an election year. It'll be interesting to see. They have to raise a ton of money, and we won't know how much money that is unless they themselves make them transparent, which the NPA did last time. I think we were transparent about the funds we had before the election, so people could see. I think that's
Right.
important, but
I remember that. I remember
You
that.
don't have to.
Yeah.
So,
But I
I
like
think
that
it's
as a move, though. I think that's an ethical piece in terms of how the electorate views you when you go, this is how much,
yeah,
because it also speaks to the amount of support you might have, you know,
yes,
at
100. Yeah,
large.
and
Yeah.
I think it can be a real positive, yeah, because it shows that
Yeah.
movement. It's not corporate money; they're not allowed to take corporate money. So these are
Right.
individual donors. If there are more individual donors to your party than another party, that means people are interested. So
People are going to be
uh,
motivated to vote for you. Let's talk. I want to get to provincial.
yes,
Well, I guess this is kind of international news as of today when we're recording. Um, Russia has sanctioned 61 Canadians, including our premier. John Horgan's not allowed to travel to Russia, George.
I can't imagine the mayor or the premier cares that much about going to Russia right now. Does anybody
No,
want to go to Russia? I
no,
mean,
no.
it's a bit silly. It's public, really. Talk about spin. I mean, Putin's just trying to uh,
Tit
put
for tat.
tit for tat, but he's
Yeah.
not.
Well, I mean,
It's an interesting ploy. I think. I
it's a
think this.
headline distraction. It's spin, is what
Yeah,
it is. But I wanted to bring it to the table because it was kind of a piece of news that broke, and then somebody on Twitter like retweeted the list of 61 Canadians, and he had said something to the effect of, "Here in Canada, we call this a list of valedictorians." I mean, the people. It was like John Tory and Doug Ford and Scott Moe and John Horgan and Jason Kenney, and
right,
I mean, and a couple of media names who had written
right.
negative reviews of the war. I mean, it's just ridiculousness. Anyway, I want to go off of ridiculous to the finally file. Adrian Dix, happy belated birthday to the health minister, Adrian Dix. But he was making announcements yesterday on Wednesday about how the provincial government is streamlining the process for international nurses
Mm,
to be recertified. And I honestly, this one's close to home for me. I've told you many times about my grandmother, who was a doctor of physiotherapy in Denmark and came here and was a hostess at UBC. Um,
yeah,
Being able to certify and fast track it and take away the financial barriers involved and just the sheer amount of time it takes. Like
for sure.
most people, particularly those coming from another country, whether they were leaving because of upheaval or whatever, they're clearly coming here for a better life
Hmm.
and not able to do that and just like, okay, you know what, I'm going to be an Uber driver instead, whatever, because I need to feed my
Yeah,
family. I really,
it's
and this also bolsters our front line.
well, it's good to hear. I think we all logically wonder, when you have the taxi driver who's a doctor or was a scientist or was this, and they say, "Well, I can't get my qualifications. You have to go back to school and start from square one." You're like, "Well, that makes." I think anybody with a logical brain, they're like, "That doesn't make sense." Are you telling me your education was that bad that you became a doctor in that country? I doubt it. And so it's nice to see. I think there are many professions that need to be fast tracked. Immigration in general is really important for Canada. Professionals and when we have a nursing and doctor shortage right now, actually we have a shortage in everything, construction, whatever, every industry right now, marketing, it's everybody needs qualified people. And if there is a requirement by whether it's the union qualifications that make this an issue, I'm not sure how it works for nursing. Who decides how you get your qualifications? But
But the nurses union wants more nurses because nurses right now they're not allowed to refuse overtime. They're
oh yeah, my
overstressed.
sister,
60%
adios,
of them are like, I'm
retired.
out. Yeah,
Yeah, she said I'm out.
exactly.
Couldn't take it
Exactly.
anymore.
Let's
Yeah.
So that might help a little bit, I guess, in the long term. It's certainly hopeful that it moves more quickly than other programs that have sort of come into play, because people were thinking that once the decision was made with the budget,
Yeah.
immediately 12-year-olds will be able to get free dental care.
Hmm.
Already hitting a roadblock there. That confidence and supply agreement has hit its first speed bump.
Well, and we have our own premier speaking out against it, asking them to slow down. Obviously, it's great. His argument was, "Hey, we need help with just our already taxed medical system." This is Premier-Horgan. I like the concept for free dental, but first we need more cash for general medicine. Also, because sure, it's great the federal government can mandate dental to be a part of your medical system, but guess who takes
Coverage.
care of that?
Yep.
Guess who takes care of that? Provinces, and the money has
Yeah.
to work for them. And of course, I think we touched on this when it first was announced, is I don't know if you have a dentist, I have a dentist, but getting into my dentist is not easy. It's often booked up months in advance. The
I
dentist, I
always
think,
book my next cleaning while I'm
yeah,
getting my
so do I.
teeth cleaned,
But if
and I
something's
don't
wrong,
move
there's
it.
a break
Yeah.
or something, and you want to get in there urgently, it's
Yeah.
it's not, if you suddenly were to add all this demand for dentists, you need to find dentists. So there's this, it's a two-headed monster that the
Yeah.
federal government, I don't think, is, or the NDP, which is no surprise federally, are naive
But it's
about, that
interesting
should
how
be
the
done.
federal NDP and the provincial NDP are
Yeah,
butting
I
up
think
against each
Horgan's
other
pretty
in a way
tight
here.
with. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that point by Horgan was almost sanctioned by Trudeau. Because I'm sure hey, it's not me. I'm a supply. Hey, I'm all with my buddies,
Right.
the federal
Right.
NDP. But hey, apparently provinces don't want this so fast, so we better slow down. Which makes it possible for him not to worry about it until the next election. In which
Right.
he's hey, NDP, I'm trying. I
I'm
really,
trying over here.
so don't walk away. Don't still support me in all my ideas. I'm trying to do this, but really, you know, I wonder if there's conversations happening to,
Punted down
yeah,
the
punt
punted
it,
down the
punt it.
field, punted down the
Yes.
field. Okay, before
Hmm.
we'd be remiss if we did not mention Pierre Polyev in this discussion after
Yes.
his tour through the West over the last week since last we spoke, and the movement, the size of the
Yeah.
rallies, the gatherings. What do we call them?
He and people are for, oh my god, it's Trump of Canada. But when he announced today because he had a TV commercial last week about in shot in Vancouver about affordability and look at these houses, blah blah blah, and then we're going to fix that. And of course, everybody said, well, that's cities deal with that. You can't deal with that, or provinces. What would the federal government do? So he released the basic concept of the plan, which includes a few things, but one is taxing potentially and dealing with ownership, and the other was using, which we've talked about here before, land that they own and fast tracking housing. The
Federal
province has
land.
lots of land, city has land, federal government has land. Um, there's land trades you can do. You can say, okay, we have a piece of property right here in downtown Vancouver, which they do. They have several pieces of property downtown Vancouver. Maybe we should do a trade and sell that for $500 million or whatever, and go and build 500 or 1,000 units over there, some other community. Take that cash and do he's talking about that stuff, and I don't get that sense the federal liberals and Trudeau have been talking about that stuff, and I think that's going to resonate. It's confusing people because it's kind of along the lines of what the NDP are talking about and EB is talking about these things. Now you got
Sounds
the federal
familiar,
conservative
right?
party
Yeah.
talking, like people are like, but wait, that's a left wing idea. You can't talk about that. You're Pierre Poilievre. You're the Trump of
Yeah.
Canada. Guess what? Good
Yeah.
ideas do not have to have be on a political spectrum. They can be a good idea, and I think, he sees an opportunity. He'll win the next election if he can capture a bunch of seats in these swing ridings where these issues are matter. So Vancouver, there are 10 seats he can win in this region, take away from not only the Liberals but from the NDP if he's got the right messages. And I think he's being very strategic. Right now, the federal government and Trudeau are so focused mostly on macro because they're forced to, because of because of the pandemic and because of this war going on over in Ukraine, they are so focused on that they haven't got time to deal with the micro stuff that's going on in these communities. So he's like, all right, I'm going to run with that ball. So it's
Yeah.
very strategic. And when you talk about spin, he's working it and he's using it to his advantage, and people, because that's what matters to us for the most part. What's happening in our community? Where are my kids going to live? How are they going to afford
Kitchen
to buy a
table.
home? Yep. Kitchen
Yeah.
table.
Kitchen
Exactly.
table issues, 100%.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he's speaking to those things, but in doing so, he's courting that fringe to the right while speaking to that
Working
mushy middle
class,
mandate.
mushy
That's
middle.
right.
Yep.
There's this
Yep.
which is
100%.
really
We talk about that a
fascinating. And
lot.
it's,
Mushy
yeah,
middle.
we do. You've taught me a great deal. So much so that we're going overtime here.
No, we
And
started late. We had a little ramble in the beginning, so we're good.
Oh, did we? Oh, did we?
Yes.
Okay. So one more thing. Can I fit in my one thing that has
Yes.
nothing to do with anything in Canada? If you're banning Judy Blume books, you
Oh.
are officially the extremist. I just want to plug this. Florida. What the hell, Florida? Banning Judy Blume.
It's crazy.
A Judy Blume book called Forever, which was probably my gateway to loving books as a teenage girl. It was like the first of romance novels written for teenage girls.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a beautiful book. It's like a John Hughes movie in book form. And for those of us of a certain age, John Hughes was like, yes, Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink,
yeah.
16 Candles, that kind of thing. It's very innocent,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also just a little bit sexy, and so because it's a little bit sexy, they're banning it in Florida, but you can still go on Netflix and watch, I don't know, Tiger King, whatever it is. Like, oh my God. Like, I just don't understand. Anyways, this list of books that's being put out that's being banned, I want to be one of those people. I actually ordered today. I'm going to buy the entire Judy Blume library and have it
and that's
in my
banning
house.
books in the school system or just in the state?
Banning them in the state.
Wow.
Because of critical race theory, which is not a real thing.
When we hear the words banning books, this is,
but they're banning those books definitely in schools, because there were 16 mathematical textbooks that apparently have critical race theory in them.
Wow.
There's too much John and Judy walk up a hill 5 miles and then whatever in the question in the math book. It's like, what?
No, it's Judy and Judy, isn't it? That's what they probably have a problem with.
That's probably what it is. It's the fact that it was John and John. Yeah, that's what it is. Gay, 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 gay. Don't say gay, 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 gay. There you go. We're done here.
Yes, they are lost. George _
Oh, sorry. On Twitter, you can find him.
I caught it today. I never catch
George.
this. You always do it. _
_affleck at Jody
and
Vance.
You are
Jody with the Y Vance. And Gilbert Godfrey, who was Affleck, passed away this week.
Affleck.
Every time somebody says your last name on the radio, Eric Chapman plays that.
He does. He does.
Say goodnight, George.
Goodbye.